I'm Colin Smith from PhotoshopCafe.com, and I'm delighted to be your instructor for this course where we're going to be digging into the new generative fill inside of Photoshop. So it's kind of taken the world by storm. The generative fill is using AI, which is based on Adobe Sensei, which is machine learning, to be able to do a lot of things. But the three main things is to remove things, to add things, and to extend images. But there's a ton of things that we can do, and we're going to explore a lot of different possibilities throughout this course. I'm also going to show you some of the gotchas, some things to avoid, and some tips and tricks to help you get much better, more predictable results. So my interface here I'm using is a Mac. This course will work on Mac or Windows. I'm going to give you the keyboard shortcuts for both, but essentially the Alt key is the Option key, the Control key is the Command key, and most other things are pretty much the same. So at the time of this recording, Generative Fill is only available inside the Photoshop public beta. But don't worry, I've got a lesson where I show you how you can locate, download, and install that and get started and follow along. Also, you'll find a folder where I've got my same images. These are all photographs I've taken myself. I'm sharing them with you so you can follow along step by step. Now, when the AI generates, it's not going to generate exactly the same image. Say, for example, we create a truck. Your truck is not going to look like my truck, so just bear that in mind, that every time it generates something, it's going to generate something that looks a little bit different, but it doesn't matter because the process and the steps are still exactly the same that you're going to be following along with. So I hope you enjoy this course. Let's jump in and get started. Generative fill inside of Photoshop is really amazing. Essentially what it does is it removes objects, it adds objects, and it extends objects. In this tutorial, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to what it can do, and then throughout the rest of this course, we're going to look at how to get it to create exactly what we want, how to get around limitations, and all kinds of other things. So the easiest way to describe it is to just demonstrate it and show it. So why don't we start with removing something from this photograph? We're going to grab the lasso tool, and let's make a selection over the city here, which happens to be Honolulu. All right, so we've made a selection. Now we're going to see this generative fill option. If you don't see this bar, go under Window and go down to Contextual Taskbar, and that will load this bar up. Now you can put this bar wherever you want, and you can also hit this little menu here and you can pin the position, which is what I've done. And there's some other tools in here, and we'll look at some of these. We'll use some of them throughout this course. Now, what we do is we hit Generative Fill. This puts us into this window where we can put in text. Now, if we put text in here, we can tell it, hey, we want to add this, and we'll do that in a moment. If we don't do anything, you can see what it says here. Describe what you'd like, or generate, or feel free to leave this blank. If we leave it blank, what it's going to do is it's going to just basically replace this based on the surrounding pixels. So it's going to say, hey, we want to get rid of the city and create something similar. So we're going to do that right now, and we're going to hit generate. Another thing to bear in mind right now at the time of this recording, it's only available in the Photoshop beta. I show you how to get that beta in another tutorial. In the future, this will be in the main Photoshop. So I'm not sure when you guys will be watching this particular lesson. All right, and after a little bit of time, it replaces it, and notice it creates a layer. Let's hide that layer. We can see there's the original. We turn it on, and then we'll see variations. There's 3 different variations in the Properties panel. So if you don't see this, it's under Window Properties, and that Properties panel will show this. So we can click through, and we can see there's a second or a third option. So whenever you generate, it's going to create 3 different options. And in fact, let me just generate one more time just to show you. Notice this bar is going here. What's happening is it's uploading it to the cloud, and that way it can use the powerful computers in the server farm to be able to do all the computational work here, and then it will send it back to your computer. All right, and now we've created 3 more. And if we look at that option and that option, so we got a little bit of water going inland, they all look different. Let me tear out the Properties panel just to show you. Now, when you generate 3 more, the originals are still there. So at any time, you can go through and you can click any of those options. And of course, you can hit Generate again if you want more. But if you know there's some in here you just really don't like or you're just not going to use, you can just hit that little X and that will remove them and just free up a little bit of memory on your system. Most of the time you're not going to be having multiple stacks of variations, but sometimes you might. All right, let me just drag this back into here. All right, so the other thing we can do too is you'll notice we have the ability to click through the variations from this arrow here in this toolbar. And you'll see there, as I move it, it moves. It's exactly the same control. Another thing to bear in mind, when we create a layer, notice this icon on here. In fact, let's make this larger. We'll go under our panel options here. And we'll make these really big. There we go. And so that icon means that this is a generative layer. So if I create some kind of a prompt, which we'll do in a second, it will travel with that. In fact, why don't I show you that right now? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a selection, and let's just make a selection up here. And why don't we add something like, say, a bird. So I'm going to hit on Generative Fill, and I'm going to type in the word bird. Click Generate. You'll notice once again there's that status bar. Now later on in this training, I'm just going to kind of clip out those bits so you don't have to watch the status bar going the whole time. But in this particular tutorial, you can see how it's working there in real time. And there we go. We've got a bird generated. And it's pretty good. It's a seagull. There's I guess it's a goose or a duck or something, maybe a goose. And there's another bird. So you can see that we can go through here and now we can add things. We can generate different objects. Let's go with this first one. And then if you look at this layer, when you click on it, you'll see the prompt will say bird. It will also say bird in the toolbar. So we have the ability to work from either of these. So if say I wanted to duplicate this layer. If I duplicate this layer now, and I'm just going to drag this bird over to the other side. Notice it's not going to blend in, of course, because when it's created, it creates a little block around where the selection is. So it actually generates part of the background as well. It's not cut out like a 3D model, so to speak. But when I'm here, if I click on there, you'll see nothing. But as I click on those, you'll see the prompt is in there, bird. So if I wanted to fit this bird in, I could hit generate again. I could hit it from here, or I could hit it from up on the toolbar. So why don't we just hit it here? I'm going to hit generate. And now it's going to generate another bird. It's not going to be the same bird. That's the thing about these. These are actually created, so they're not clip art or pieces of photographs. So what's actually happening is this AI, which is what's behind it, and we'll talk about it more in later lessons, but this is actually trained from images. These images are in Adobe stock. We'll talk about all that later on once again. But what it does is it looks at all those millions of images, and it analyzes those images, and it starts to understand what a bird looks like. So it looks at millions of pictures of birds. And by the way, here's some other birds here, and that's why we get pelicans, all kinds of birds here. Right, so it looks at all those birds, and it understands what a bird looks like. So it doesn't go into Adobe stock, find a picture of a bird in somebody's photo, cut it out, and then paste it in here. What happens is the machine learning actually generates a new image. So this is called generative. So it, out of knowing what a bird looks like, it creates a brand new bird that's never existed before. It'll match the angle, it'll match the lighting, it'll match the atmosphere, and you'll see as we go through this course, it's actually going to adapt to all those different things. Now notice the size of it is based on the size of that selection. If I wanted a smaller bird, I can just hit Control-T or Command-T, and let's make our selection smaller. So now we're still working on this selection here, but this selection is based on that layer, which is the generative layer. Obviously, it's not going to look good because that, remember, it's not floating. It's on that background. I mean, you could cut it out if you wanted, but we can just hit generate again. It still says bird. We hit generate. It's going to update this generation, and whatever it creates is going to blend in with that background because it's going to create a new background behind that selected area. So there we go. There's a different bird. And we could go through different types of birds and see, hey, how is that looking? Now, we can try to get a more accurate bird. So say, for example, let's type in, rather than bird, let's type in seagull. And now we're going to generate and see if it gets a seagull. Now, sometimes it gets it right and sometimes it doesn't. What is one of the things that's going to happen very quickly? This is going to get better. If you've used any other generative AI, there we go. It's a seagull for sure. If you've used any other generative AI, such as Midjourney or DALL-E or Stable Diffusion, you'll notice that they improve very quickly. So last, 6 months ago, Midjourney couldn't create faces very well. The eyes were all glassy and weird. It couldn't count fingers. And now it's much better because it's progressed that much faster. And this is the same thing that's going to happen here. Now, this is all based on Adobe Sensei, which is the AI that Adobe has actually been using for a long time. If you've looked at things like, the automatic selection tools that maybe you've been using for a while, such as Select Subject, or maybe the neural filters, or different things like that. Some of the fill brush, the remove brush. There's all kinds of AI that Adobe's actually been working on for about 10 years now, and just slowly putting different parts and even upscale. Like, there's a lot of parts in Photoshop that are already using it. And then so what they've done is they've leveraged that, and now they've added the ability to generate images using the Firefly technology. So Firefly was released by Adobe as a standalone, kind of a playground online where people could get early access and start playing around with generating images. Now that technology is inside of Photoshop, and this is where we're generating. All right, so we've looked at two things that we can do. We can remove things, we can add things, and then the third thing we can do is we can extend things. And I'm just giving very basic examples right now, of course. So let's go into the crop tool, and why don't we extend this? Why don't we grab down here, and I'm just going to hit enter to apply. So we want to extend this image and create a foreground. This doesn't exist. And this also shows why it's AI, because there's no way it could take a piece of another photograph and paste it in and have it perfectly match this photograph. So it's going to generate it. So always want a little bit of an overlap, and it just gives it a little bit of buffer room to play with. And once again, we don't want to put anything in here. We're just going to hit Generative Fill with no instructions and just let it use surrounding pixels, the surrounding environment, and create something that matches. So we're going to let it do that. And just going to take a little moment here. Larger pieces seem to take a little bit longer sometimes. And look at that. See how that road, it's a road that goes to nowhere, but that road definitely lines up. And look at this. This lines up. And let's have a look at some other options. There we go. There's a different variation and a completely different variation there. So, it's not bad. It's not perfect, but you could select that part of the road if you wanted. Let me show you. So if we wanted to have a road, say, for example, we could drag that out there, make a selection, and now we can go in and give it instructions. So we can hit Generative Fill here, and we can type in road and hit generate. And of course, we have no idea what we're going to get. It could be good, it could be bad. And sometimes at this stage of development, the results are pretty random. Sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're not. So there we go. We've got some kind of a road there. And as you can see, okay, that's definitely a lot better. That's more believable. You could say tarmac road with yellow, medium strip, whatever. We'll worry about that later on when we want to get more specific on images. Right now, I just want to kind of give you that introduction into here. All right, so another thing we could do is, why don't we just make a selection around here, and just to give you an idea of the capabilities, I'm going to hit Generative Fill here, and I'm going to type in lake. And we'll hit generate. Okay, that did not work very well at all. That sort of started to get it, and that failed. So what happens if you try to generate something like that and it doesn't work? So what do I do in a situation like that? It's actually really simple. I just dump it, And we'll just get rid of that whole layer. And I'm just going to start again with a new selection. Because one of the things that's interesting about here, and we'll get into that more into the lesson, is the selection is so important. The shape of that selection is just going to make a massive, massive difference into everything. So let's go here and we're just going to choose lake again and let it work with a different shape selection. And this should give us different results. Yep, now it's generating a lake perfectly. So look at that. 3 different lakes there. So there's a big tip for you guys that you probably saw there is if it's not working, don't keep generating and generating and generating. Just dump it, create a new selection, and let it do its magic. In fact, the biggest secret that you're going to take away from this is the selection is absolutely everything. It really makes a bigger difference than almost anything else inside the application. All right, so I think this has given us a good little introduction into, what this does, what it can do. And what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into some very specific lessons, and then we're going to work through it. I'm going to give you some tips along the way, and then I'm also going to show you when it's a good time to mix this with the tools, because we've got a whole suite of tools inside of Photoshop. And sometimes generating is not the fastest or the best way to get that result. Sometimes you want to combine it with the other tools, like we will throughout the rest of this course. In this lesson, I'm going to tell you how to get the Photoshop beta. So the first thing you have to do, if you haven't already done it, is download the Creative Cloud app. And once you have it, you'll see it up the top here. If you're on Windows, you'll see it down the bottom, or just search, go to your Applications folder, and then you're going to click and launch Creative Cloud. Now, the next thing you need to do is make sure you're signed in, which I am here. Then what you want to do is you want to make sure you've got the latest updates. So you'll see under Updates, you'll see Check for Updates. So when you click there, it's going to ping the server, and it's going to look for the very latest updates. And then also just load in the latest version of everything. As you can see here, I've got an update here. But where you're going to find the beta is you're going to go down on the left-hand side, and you're going to see Beta Apps. And then under Beta Apps, you'll see, I've got all these ones available. And one of them will be Photoshop. If you've never installed it before, just click Install. And then this will install it alongside the other version of Photoshop. So you don't have to uninstall Photoshop, whatever version you're on, to run it along with the beta. So you can download the beta, and and then if there's an update, you just click Update Available, click there, and then I'll click Update. And then once you've done that, make sure you're running the Photoshop beta. So that means when you push in Photoshop, and you're searching, you'll see, there's the beta app, there's the 2023, which is the current version I'm running. And so you can run that, or you can run the beta. Now, if you're running the 2023, you won't see the toolbar. So even when you've installed the beta, make sure that's the one you launch, and you'll see beta up the top here. All right, so once you've done that, and you have to have a valid Creative Cloud account. If you don't have a Creative Cloud account, you can't access the beta, essentially. All right, so then the other thing that could happen is you're updated and you've got it running and everything like that, and then your generate bar is grayed out. Let me just create a new document here just quickly. Just create something. And then I'll just do that. And so if your generative fill is grayed out and it's not showing, what you need to do is log into your Creative Cloud account or into Behance, and then what you need to do is verify your age, because the generative fill is only available to people 18 years old and older. So just go in there and verify that your age, or just enter your age is more than 18, and you should be good to go. All right, so that's how you're going to get everything set up, and then you should be ready to follow along with all the rest of these lessons. One of the things we can do with generative fill is actually create images from scratch. So why don't we do that right now? We're just going to choose File, New, and I'm just going to do 1920 by 1080, which is HD resolution. Let's get rid of those guides. So we're just going to choose the view guides, and let's clear those guides. Great. All right, so we can start with the marquee tool or anything we want to make a selection. So why don't we start at the top, and we're going to ask for a dark, gloomy, cloudy sky. And see what we get. All right, that's a good starting place. We could look at the 3 variations, the second and the third variation. I kind of like that variation. So why don't we go here, and I'm going to go right onto the thing, and then we're going to type in ocean. All right, we've got a few different options here. I think we're going to go with this option. And I feel like we need a beach, so why don't we just select around where the surf is? And we're going to type in beach. Notice I didn't use a straight line because I want it to be a little more organic and not perfectly straight. So the shape of the selection will definitely influence what is generated in a big way. All right, we've got a rocky beach. That was unexpected. Now, if I wanted a sandy beach, I would have put sandy and asked for a sandy beach, but I kind of like this. This is neat. Why don't we do a little bit over here, and let's type in rocks. Let's see what we can get on the side here. All right, we've got some big boulders here. Those look pretty neat. All right, so as you can see, we've started to generate a scene here. Now, where it doesn't do quite as well sometimes is doing different types of creatures, but let's try it and see what we can do here. Maybe we can put a little crab on here and see if it'll work. That one's not too bad. Maybe the scale's a pretty large crab, but that's fine. And maybe we're going to put a bird here. Let's do... So we're going to have it kind of sitting up, all right? And we'll do something like a seagull. Okay, so there we go. We got the seagull looking right at us. Now, if I'm looking at it scale-wise, I'm going to say that the seagull is maybe a little too big. So here's another thing we can do. We can scale this down. So just select that layer, hit Control-T for transform, and I'm just going to scale it down to about the size that I would want this seagull, and we're going to position it where we'd want it. I'm going to say about there. Now, here's the interesting thing. Because this is a generative layer, even though we resized it, it still has seagull in the prompt, and all we need to do is hit generate one more time. It's not going to give us the same seagull, but it's going to generate another seagull at the new size, and it's going to blend it into the background. Now, bear in mind that that area around it is also going to be part of it. Let me show you. If I show hide all other layers. So wherever you make the selection is actually the background. So these are not going to be cut out. You could cut them out and reposition them manually if you wanted. I'm going to hit the Alt or Option key and go there. But what it does is just going to blend these different ones in. And it just, you know, as you can see there, it generates around the background. All right, so we've got a bird there. Now, what if we wanted to have another seagull but have it flying? Well, watch this. If I hit the Alt or the Option key and I drag this out, like what I've done right now is I've dragged out a copy of it. This is still a seagull, but let's hit Control-T, and then I'm going to hold the Shift key so I can go non-proportional scaling. And why don't we drag this out a little bit and maybe even slightly angle it like this. Now, I'm looking at not necessarily that area. I'm looking at the area that's being selected, and we definitely need that to go further. I need to really widen that out. There we go. That looks good. Don't worry about what the result looks like right now. Actually, let me tilt the other way. Let's go that way. So what I want to do now is I want to generate another seagull into that shape. So we're going to hit generate, and now it's going to generate another seagull. And there we go. And notice that it's using that shape, and we're going to get, you know, brand new ones. Those two are not great. I think that one there is about the best one. that we've got there. Now, if you didn't like it, you could hit generate one more time and it'll generate a completely different one. But I think you're getting the general idea, right? So it doesn't matter if you distort it. Once you regenerate, it's just going to use that shape of that selection. That's all it really cares about. So let's go over here. Let's see if we can get a whale going. It's probably not going to be great, but let's try it just because, let's see. Because some of these, things like some of the animals and people, it's not doing a fantastic job at those at the moment, but those are definitely going to improve very, very quickly. If you've ever used things like Midjourney, you'll notice how far they got just in a few short months. All right, this is actually not too bad at all, actually. Pretty decent. Okay, let's have a look at the crab, because I'm really not happy with that crab. So the nice thing about that is I can actually just hide that layer if I don't want it. I could generate a different crab if I wanted, but I just feel like that crab doesn't look great. And the whale is not really blending off into the distance too well either. So one of the things, I could try to do is maybe just drop the opacity on a little bit. If I go too much, you're going to see things through it and it's going to look fake. But I can actually get away with dropping it down just a little bit, down to like 80%. And you don't notice that it's the opacity. It just seems a little less intense. So as you see, we can generate complete scenes from nothing using this generative fill, as well as working with existing photographs. Now, we could do other things with this. Why don't we do this just for fun? I'm going to show you if we want to extend this whole scene. Let's make the scene bigger. Let's just go all the way down here, hit enter, and all I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a selection here for a little bit of overlap. And I know we've got another lesson, where I'm showing how to extend an image, but I want to show you we can extend a completely generated image as well. We're going to hit generate fill, and then just hit generate without putting anything else in here, and just let it generate. Now, one of the things too is when it does generate, it has a maximum of 1024 by 1024 pixels. So whatever size you've got, it's going to stretch to fit that. So you're going to get a lower resolution. However, if we start to build up the image slowly like we're doing here, we're actually getting better resolution because we're building it up in small pieces. So if you find some areas, hey, like a little too low res, then just pop them in. But in this case, I think this is looking great. Sometimes you take a photograph and the edge gets cut off and you want to kind of change that. So this is actually one of the very easy ones for it to do. So why don't we just grab the crop tool. With the crop tool selected, make sure you hit clear so any aspect ratio is removed. And then just extend it out how far you want it to go. I'll hit enter to apply. Now, in the past, it would have been quite difficult to clone these bananas and get the tree and everything to just kind of look the way it should. But now we're just going to make a selection with the rectangular marquee tool. Just go slightly over the area so we've got a little bit of overlap. Now we're going to hit generative fill. We want to extend the picture, so we're not going to put anything in there. We're just going to choose generate. Now, once it's generated, we're going to have three results. If we look in the properties panel under variations, we'll see three different variations, and we can click on each of these and notice that we get a different result. So you can choose the one you want. Alternatively, if you want to go to the toolbar up here, we can also click. So if you just click on each one, it's going to go through each generation, and you'll notice it's also moving in the variations tab there. So it's just a very easy way to navigate and find the one that you want. A really useful place for generative fill is when you're working on panoramas. So if you've ever created panoramas in Photoshop or Lightroom, you'll get these kind of hemispherical kind of things going around the edges. And generally we use content-aware fill to fill those in, and with mixed results. Usually skies work pretty well, but the foreground areas don't usually work so well. But we can easily fix this, and what we're going to do is even extend the image a little bit. So I'm going to grab the crop tool. And under the crop, just hit clear so you're not forced to any particular aspect ratio. And drag it up and drag it down if you want to add to it. If you don't want to add to it, you don't have to expand it, but I just want to give you that option because sometimes you want to display it. Maybe you want to display it a little bit taller. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to generate the top and the bottom individually. The reason for that is resolution. Currently, right now, Generative Fill only creates at 1K, which was 1024 pixels square for each fill. If I was to do the top and bottom, it's going to apply that 1K to the entire image, and it's going to come out very low resolution. So you could do it in smaller segments to get better results. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the top part here. And now we're just going to generate the sky. I'm going to choose Generative Fill, and I'm not going to put anything in. I'm just going to choose Generate and let it extend that sky. Now, typically, you're not going to get a lot of resolution issues in the sky. I mean, if you've got some very detailed clouds, that could happen. And it's possible it could happen in this area. We'll see. All right, that looks pretty good. So that's generated the top. Now we want to do the bottom. So I'm going to select the bottom part of this image. But I know there's more detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this side. Let's click here. And I'm just going to do this side right up to there on its own. And I'm going to choose Generative Fill and let it generate. Because this is a 2000 pixel wide image. So, it's a lower res, for your exercise file. But if you're working on a high resolution image, just do it in smaller chunks. And notice we're going to get some interesting results here. Don't worry about that just yet. We're going to go across here and we're going to go right up to that edge. And we're going to fill this in. Whoops, we need to go a little higher there. And let's choose Generative Fill. Hit Generate. And there we go. We've filled that in nicely. And of course, we've got the variations, so we could click through these variations. And if there's other options that you prefer, you could choose those. But I think that's looking pretty good. So this is one of the uses we can do, for these panoramas. And of course, if you want to crop it back in again, you can. But it just gives you a lot more to play with and work with. If you've ever been to New York, specifically Brooklyn Bridge, it's almost impossible to find it without people on it. So what we can do is use the Generative Fill to get rid of these people. So let's grab our lasso tool. And sometimes it's better to kind of do these like maybe in 2 or 3 passes, but it's always worth a try to see if we can do it in one hit. And let's just select everybody here. And then we're going to hit Generative Fill. Now we're not going to put anything in there. We're just going to hit Generate and see if it can just replace it with the background. A lot of situations like this, when you do it, you end up with some kind of an artifact. But it's not too bad to actually come back and then just remove the artifact afterwards. In this situation, we just got it bang on first go. So if we look at the other variations, we'll see sometimes you'll get things like that or things like that that are not necessarily wanted. But here, we just got it perfectly first go. Now, if you do get things like this that you want to get rid of, well, let's say this, then all you got to do is just essentially select the area that you don't like. I'm going to hit the Shift key to add to it. So I just want to leave a little bit of that white line down the middle there. And then we're just going to hit Generative Fill and let it generate. And notice it's going to create a separate layer now. So rather than just doing it in one hit, we can do it in 2 hits. Of course, we got very lucky with the first one. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you just hit it like right out of the park first time. And other times you might have to go for a second attempt like I did here. And if we look at the second or the third variation there, I'm thinking I actually pretty much like maybe the second variation the best. And there we go. We've removed all the people out of here. And now you could composite your own people into the scene or, do whatever it is you wanted to do with this particular image. So in the previous example, we looked at how to get rid of all the people on the bridge. Now, what if, for example, I handed my camera to somebody and I had them take a picture of me and, they got a good shot of me in the bridge, but there's someone behind me moving, taking pictures of other people. How do I get rid of everyone behind me, but yet preserve myself in the photograph? So what you want to do, first of all, is you want to cut your subject out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the object or the quick selection, any of these. Now, if I do the object finder, if I roll over, I'm probably going to appear. But I want a better selection than that. So I'm going to go under the select subject and see the little arrow. We've got device or cloud. If I choose cloud, it's going to give me a much better result than if I do use device, because device is using the local power of my local computer, whereas the cloud is using the, all the servers and much more powerful computing. But you have to be connected to the internet to do it. But of course, we have to be connected to the internet to do generative fill anyway. All right, great. So now that we've done that, let's choose select subject and let's get a selection of the person. Looking good. Let's zoom in a little bit and see how good this selection is. See if it's good enough. I think we need to refine this a little bit. So I'm going to grab the selection brush. So we're going to grab the quick selection tool. Hit the left bracket key to make it smaller. Now, if we hit the minus key, that's going to take away from the selection. The plus key is going to add to the selection, or just paint on it. So I'm just going to kind of clean up this edge a little bit. Now, this isn't a course on making selections, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I just want to show you, how we can get a better selection here. And let's just go around there. And there we go. We just definitely want to just get rid of these really obvious areas. Looking pretty good there. And I'm going to lose a little bit of my ear. Let me grab that. And hit the minus, get the neck, and then just go back in again. All right. A little bit more here. Great. A little bit more. All right. So I'm not going to take the time to make it perfect, but that's pretty good. That's actually a pretty decent selection now. You could go into select and mask and further refine it if you want. In fact, why don't I, just to show you how to do it. So we'll go into select and mask, turn the transparency all the way up. Now let's take this down to 100% view so we can see, accurately what we're looking at. And I'll just click on something. Well, let's just hit the enter key. I don't want to hit the enter key because there we go. That got it. And what I want to do is just show the edge here. And the reason I want to show the edge is I'm going to choose a radius. And I want to pull it just when that edge is just starting to show. And then I'm going to turn that off. That's actually going to help me a little bit on that edge as well. And then the other thing you can do is if you scroll down here, you'll see another option that will enable us to just refine this a little bit more. That will be under, let's go under output settings. We could choose decontaminate colors. And that'll get rid of, any kind of colored fringing. And then we're going to do a new layer for layer mask. Sounds good to me. Click OK. Great. So now if we look at this, we've got our whole image underneath with this cutout of myself on top. So we're just going to hide that top layer and just show the background, make sure it's selected. All right, let's just grab our lasso tool and let's just go around and see if we can get rid of everything here. So let's just go around there. Try and keep it a little bit tight on some of the details, but don't worry about it too much over there. And now let's hit our generative fill and hit generate and see what we get. And that's looking pretty good. And then just turn the layer on with yourself back in there. Okay, so it looks pretty good, but notice the feet are looking pretty bad. So what we want to do is let's just have a look and we're going to see what we've got in this image. If we look here, there's our original feet. Notice the shadows are in there. Now we could try and recreate those shadows, but an easier way to do that would actually be just to paint inside this mask. So that layer, if we want to hide that portion of the layer, we're going to hit black. If we want to show that portion of the layer, we paint with white. So what we want to do is hide that portion of the layer around the feet area. So we're going to grab our brush and make sure we're painting with black. And as we paint, notice we paint back in the previous layer. And let's go right up to the edge of that line. And now if I pop myself back in there, notice I go over the top. And now we've got the natural looking shadows in there to ground, to kind of just ground the photo and make it look like I'm there and not just floating. So that's how you can kind of combine things like masks and retouching. All right, in this example, we want to get rid of this sign, which is covering part of the building. Now, this would have been quite difficult to have done before, so we're going to grab our lasso tool, and with the lasso, I'm going to make a selection around that area. Let me just hit the Shift key. I want to add to there, make sure we get that ladder. There we go. Great. Now, had I used Content Aware Fill, let me show you the result. I'm going to hit Shift Delete, and that would be Shift Backspace on Windows. Under Content, choose Content Aware, click OK. And you're going to get an OK result. Clearly, it's far from perfect. And you can see what's happening with this is it's sampling, like you can see part of the clock up here. And so it samples other pixels and just basically duplicates the pixels. So when we use Generative Fill, it doesn't duplicate the pixels in the image. It generates brand new pixels based on machine learning, what it's learned about buildings, what it looks in the surrounding areas, and it's going to literally know that this is a building. It knows this is a glass building. And why don't we hit Generative Fill? Now, when we go to choose the Generative Fill, I can enter a description of what I want to put in here. If I just want to replace something or remove something, don't enter anything, just hit Generate. And you'll see, the bars going across the bottom, and it's generating. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to build 3 different variations, and we're going to examine these variations in a moment and see, how well it's done. So when I look at this is really good. There's some weird stuff going on down here, but let's have a look at the second option. Okay, so it's a different kind of a look here, because if you look at the original, it doesn't know what's behind there, so it's guessing, right? And then we look at the third option, which is pretty good as well. I think I like the third option, but I'd like to put one of these in there. So how would I do this? Well, the first thing I want to do is get rid of this down the bottom here. So let me just select that. And we're just going to run the generate again just to kind of fix that. Notice that pops it on a new generated layer too. Every time you create, if you work on the same one and you regenerate it, it works on the same layer. But if you create a different selection, it creates a new layer. Look at that. That's nice. So we've got that in a couple of hits, and it looks like we just want to add this now. So the way to do that is let's just create a new layer on top, and rather than messing around with Generative, we can combine it with the suite of tools that already exist inside of Photoshop. So why don't we grab our trusty clone stamp tool. We're going to sample all layers, and I know I want one of these, so I'm going to hold down the Alt or the Option key, and in fact, why don't we zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to select there, and I'm going to move it right to that edge, and we can just paint another one of these in. Now I'm going to go over, and I'll do that on purpose, because I don't need all the stuff around there. So at this point, all I need to do is grab the Polygon Lasso tool, and use whatever selection tool is going to be the best for whatever surface you're working on. Straight edges, the Polygon Lasso tool works really, really nicely. Let's go in there, select that edge, go up here. All right, I don't want to quite remove it yet, because if I look at the focus on the photograph, it's a little bit soft here. So I don't want that super hard edge. So I'm going to take the feather, and I'm going to change this to, I don't want to do the feather now because it's already applied. So we have to choose the selection, and we choose modify. So if you're going to feather it before you create the selection, hit feather. Otherwise, you're going to select, modify, and feather. And under here, I'm just going to give it, I don't know, just give it 2 pixels. Click OK. And now I can just literally hit in this area. I can just delete it. Control D turns off the selection, and look at that. Looking wonderful. All right, so that's how we remove things. So throughout this course, we're going to be using the Generative Fill, but we're also going to be using other tools inside of Photoshop to finish the job. Because, you can build a house with a hammer, but it's much better to also use a saw and use the right tool for the right job. So Generative Fill is a great job. A great tool to get us started. Many times it'll get us the whole way, and then other times you want to combine it with the other tools. in this lesson, we're going to be creating objects. There's a couple of things you're going to learn here. One of them, and it's not apparently obvious, probably the most important thing to influence what's going to be generated is going to be the shape of the selection. You can use any of the selection tools in Photoshop, but resist just, using a marquee tool or whatever. Think about the shape that you want to generate. That actually is the biggest influence, even more so than some of the keywords. Now, the keywords are going to be very important. As far as keywords, you don't want to use anything like make her taller, make her smaller. Those kind of things don't really mean anything. What you want to do is give it a noun, the object, which would be maybe a ball or a guitar, for example, cat, dog, and then give properties, the color, the material, what it's made out of. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it old? Is it new? Is it wrinkled? Is it warm? Is it on fire? These are the kind of words that we can use. Now, in Adobe's guides, they say between 2 and 8 words is what they recommend. Now, most of the time, you can actually get away with just one word if your shape is right. Let me demonstrate. So let's put a ball in her hand. Now, I'm going to grab the elliptical marquee tool. And I'm going to draw a circle. And let's put about here because we want to generate a ball. All right. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see it better. Okay, so we've created this area and now we want a ball in here. I'm going to hit Generate Fill. And we're going to hit Ball. Now it's going to generate a ball. And it will put it where it should be in the fingers. It won't go over the top of the thumb. That thumb should be gripping around it. And there we go. Look at that. So we've got a ball. We've got 3 options. But we're not giving it any directions. We're just saying create a ball. But we know it's going to be a round ball because we created a round selection. Now, if I wanted to change this to a baseball, and we hit Generate again, notice we're still on that same layer, that generative layer. When you click on it, you can go into the Properties panel, and you can change the prompt. I could change the prompt up here on the toolbar as well, but we're just going to do it from here, and we're going to choose Generate. And now it's going to create a baseball. And there we go. We've got 3 different options as far as a baseball. Now, as far as size, the size of your selection is going to influence it, but it's still going to try to create it at the right size. But the other thing you'll notice that the lighting matches, depth of field matches, everything like that. Now, if you wanted to give it other properties, we could perhaps make it a yellow baseball. I don't know if such a thing exists, but let's just generate one anyway, just to show you how we can vary the properties. So remember, the selection is telling us we've got something round. There we go. And now we can create a yellow baseball. All right, let's look at something different here. Let's change the shape of this. So let's go into the elliptical marquee tool. And now I'm going to make something more oblong. So let's make it a little bit smaller. All right, so I'm going to pop this in here. And guess what? Without telling it a football, I'm just going to tell it a ball. But I'm pretty sure we're going to get a football, American football, because of the shape. So you're kind of guiding it with that shape. Now, if I tilted that, it would be at an angle. But right now, we're just going to do it. And look at that. There's a football, and she's grabbing a hold of it. There's 3 different options. Now, as far as the size or anything like that, once again, you can vary the size by changing it. But look at that. All right, let me demonstrate what we're doing here just a little bit more here. I'm going to grab the lasso tool, and I'm going to make a shallow selection around her head. And I'm not going to go very high, and I'm going to tell it to create a hat. And we're going to hit Generate. Now, I've got a pretty good idea it's going to create something like a beret or some kind of a hat like that because of the shape that we've given it. And okay, so we've got these interesting hats here, but you can see that shape is influencing the kind of hat that we're getting. Now, if I wanted something more like a top hat, I would make a selection here. I'd go lower on the head so it could go down a little bit more. And then I'm going to go higher to give it more room. And now I'm going to take a hat, and now it's going to create something like a, top hat, party hat. Might be one of those conical hats because I am going a little bit narrow at the top. But I think we can pretty safely, we're going to get, top hat, right? Look at that. Because of that shape. Now, here's the interesting thing. At any time, I can go back and choose the other objects. But before we do, let's do another one. What if we want a beanie? We know we need to go low. So we give it room to kind of sit. And then we're going to go up. But let's not go up too far. Let's go up a little bit, giving it enough room there for a beanie hat. Now I'm going to hit Generative Fill. And there we go. Now we're getting something that looks like a beanie. Just because of the shape. Now, what if I want to get the one that has a little ball on top? So we can add a new layer, but let me show you how you can modify an existing mask. So if we select here, and now we're on the mask, and let me control click load that selection first. Now I'm going to hit the Q key. The Q key is giving me a quick mask. So what I want to do now is I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm going to expand the size of our selection. I'm going to go larger so we've got room to put that little ball on top. There we go. Hit the Q again, and now we go back to a selection. So that's how it kind of toggles between a selection and a mask, is the Q key. But what I want to do here is I want to make sure in this mask that I fill that area with white. Hit the D key to reset the foreground background color with that mask selected. Hit Option Delete. That's going to be Alt Backspace on Windows, and then Control D to turn off the selection. So essentially what we've done is we've just modified that mask. Now without doing anything, I'm going to go back to our layer. Notice our variations still exist. And I'm just going to hit Generate again. And we can see, we're definitely getting that type of hat. What if we want to get a red woolen hat? Let's just type this in. And then we're going to hit Generate. And there's the three options we have there. All right, let's go a little bit further. So why don't we just make a selection around her clothing here? I'm going to go down a little bit, and we're going to change her dress into workout pants and a red t-shirt. So we're going to hit Generate Fill. Type in red t-shirt. And look at that. There's a second option, a third option. And you see how we can change those kind of properties. Now her hair's gone a little bit curly. So what if we select her hair, hold down the Shift key, select the hair on the other side, and then just type in straight hair. Okay, there's the three options we've got there. It's definitely straighter, but it's not exactly what we want. So let's start with the one in the middle here, which is closer, and then we're going to hit Generate one more time from the Properties panel. And there we go. That's a little bit more like what we were looking for. That's more like your natural hair there. So another thing we can do is we can actually just create objects out of thin air. And why don't we get a couple of cats going here? I want a cat that's lying down, so I'm going to make a long selection. Because notice that if it fits the cat in there, the cat is going to lie down, generally speaking. So let's do cat. There we go. Little kitten. That's cute. There's the three options there. I think I kind of like that first one. Now remember, these are generated. So let's put another cat over here. Meaning it's not cut and pasted from a photograph. These are actually generated. Let's do another cat. This one's probably going to be sitting or standing. And notice I interchangeably enter the prompt in the properties or in the generate panel. And look at that. We've got a cat that's standing. Oh, look at that. Could be its mother. All right. So if you think about what we had before, let me drag this over here. I'm going to hit the Alter the Option key and click. Here was the before image, and there's the after image. So some things to bear in mind. When we are working in these layers, all of these layers, we can still access them. See that? And then when we access these layers, the variations are in there. So if we wanted that different variation of that football, we could click in there and change the football. See that? If we wanted the variations of the cats, we could do that. You know, if we wanted to go back to that round ball, we could do that as well. And then when we click on it, let me pull the properties panel out. All the variations that we created are still there. So I can select one of those baseballs if I wanted. Now, the only place where this wouldn't work is when we start to get overlap. Say, for example, if I go in here and I try to change the variations of these hats, they might work or they might not. Okay, in this case, we're going to be okay. But if I try to do the hair, I think we could run into problems. So let's go here. And we could try the different hairs. Yeah, you can see they're getting a little bit messed up in the shirt up here where they overlap. Look at that. All right, that's how we add objects. One of the things that Generative Fill can do is it can replace objects. So we could replace, say, for example, this slate with something different. Now, one of the things to be aware of at this moment in time, it's not very good at generating hands. And I know this sounds like deja vu because this is the same way Midjourney was about 6 months ago. So it's going to get much better at hands. So don't expect much. But let's start with this, and then I'm going to show you how to kind of get around that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this slate. Why don't we replace it with a bag? So I'm just going to go around there. Now, I want to not cut into the slate and follow this shape, because if I follow the shape of it here, of course, it, you know, in there, then it's going to be difficult for it to create a bag because the outline is going to be strange. So we're going to choose Generative Fill, and we'll just type in bag, and we'll let it generate any type of bag that it wants. And it's probably going to generate a new hand. And here we go. And it's generated a bag right there. And it looks like she's holding the bag. Now the hands, that's not bad actually for a hand. They can get much worse. Let's have a look there. There's another bag. And there's another one. Actually, not bad actually as far as the hands are going. Okay, so another way that we can get around this, let's look at the other image here. Let's look at this image. And then what we can do is we can actually just go around and trace, keep the hands there, and then just trace around the rest of the image. So we're not going to be going inside the hands. And then that way it won't generate any new hands. It'll use the existing ones. All right, so let's go all the way around this ray gun. And I'm going to hit the Shift key and just add here because I want to make sure I get the front there. It's important that you get all the areas of the object that you want to replace. If you leave bits out, they're going to kind of affect the final image. Let's just get that little bit of that trigger there. All right, great. So why don't we replace this? We're going to choose Generative Fill, and why don't we replace it with an iguana? And then hit Generate. And it's really amazing how we'll build the object and it will actually generate an object that's going to work around where the hands are. Look at that. So that's, maybe it's not quite an iguana, but look at this. We've got all kinds of different things. That one's a little bit weird. That one's actually not bad. More of a chameleon, but so as you can see here, it just replaces the object with a different object. You know, you could type in any type of objects that you wanted and do a replacement that way. All right, in this lesson, we're going to look at how we duplicate or move different objects that we've generated. So we got this shot from Central Park. What we're going to do is we're going to create a truck. So I'm just going to make a selection using the lasso tool. We'll just kind of start down here and just grab a nice big area here. Now we're going to hit Generative Fill. So we're going to go a little bit more advanced with the setup this time. Rather than just doing a truck, we want to define the color. So we're going to do a 1950s style green rusty pickup truck. So see, it's a little bit more descriptive. But the other thing is I want to make it fit in the environment, so I put snow on top. If I don't put snow on top, it's probably not going to get any snow. So we want to make it match the scene. Let's hit Generate. All right, let's see what we've got for results. That's the first one. second one, and the third one. So I'm thinking the first one looks probably the most realistic. Although remember, in time, these are going to get better and better. But we're going to work with this. This is great. So what happens if I want to move this or make a copy of it? So I'll show you the quick way to make a copy. Notice we've got the layer. It's a generative layer. It's selected. If I hold down the Alt or the Option key, I can click and I can drag out a copy of this. Notice that we've now got another generative layer. The problem with this is, notice it doesn't fit into the background. Because when it cuts out the selection area and generates into that area. So what do we do? Well, we've got a couple of options. First of all, what happens if I'm here and I hit generate again? I think you know what's going to happen. It's going to generate a new truck, maybe even a better one. We'll see, but it's not going to generate the same truck. But watch the background. When it generates a new truck, see that? Now it does blend it into the background because of that generation. But these are different trucks. We don't have the same truck. So when you duplicate something, it's very hard to get exactly the same. I mean, this one's actually kind of similar, but it's still not the same, right? So let me just get rid of that. So what do we do? How do we move or duplicate this truck? Well, let me show you. I'm going to hold the Alt or the Option key, and I'm going to drag this truck in here. Now, I want to blend this into the environment. So we're working on this layer. So the best way to do that is let's load the selection from the truck first. So we're going to go under the Select Object Selection or Quick Selection, either of these, and we're looking for Select Subject. Let's choose Cloud, and we're going to choose Select Subject. So now what it's going to do is it's going to create a selection around the truck. Now I want to save this selection. So I'm going to choose Select and Save Selection, and we'll call it Truck. Click OK. Now, we could have just cut this out and masked it out traditionally, but let me show you what we can do here to make it just kind of, because if you look at, see where it kind of blends here, it's exactly the same, right? So I'm going to take off that selection, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the selection from the mask area. Control click, and that loads up our whole mask area. But now what I want to do is I want to remove the truck. So we're selecting just basically this area around the truck. So we're going to choose Select, Load Selection, and then under Load Selection, we're going to choose Truck. But what we want to do is subtract from Selection, and then click OK. Great, so now we've selected the area in between. Now, if I don't want this ground to look exactly the same, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the lasso tool. And I'm just going to add to the selection in here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm just going to drag around that area. And let's just add that to the selection. So it's just giving us a different kind of a baseline right there. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it's a good idea. All right. Now that we've done that, make sure we're on the layer itself, not the mask, but the layer itself. And then we're going to hit Generative Fill. And then we're just going to type in Generate without putting anything in there. And then what it's going to do is it's going to blend that selected area, which is the background, and make our truck fit the scene. And look at that. And look at the different variations. So that's how you can duplicate something and keep exactly the same object. And if I just wanted to, do something like maybe I just wanted to move it, I can always hide the original. So there we go. We've got that truck there. There's our selections there. All right. So hopefully you find that useful. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to mix and match generations. You'll see what I mean in a second. So first of all, why don't we just grab the trusty lasso tool, and we're going to get rid of all these barriers. So let's just go select over here. Great, we got the first one. Hold down the Shift key. We're going to select the second one. Now for higher resolution, you're better off to do these one at a time. But that will change in time. So that's why I'm just going to hold down that shift key as adding to our selection. I'm just going to show you a technique that should last a long time. So if you want to do these individually, you can, but I'm going to do them all together. I'm going to hit Generative Fill, and now I'm going to click Generate. All right, let's see what we've got. There's the first option, the second option, and the third option. So it's looking pretty good. Now, I don't really like what's going on the left-hand side on that first one. The trash can's not really that appealing. So I'm going to say on the right-hand side of the image, I like what's going on here. So number 2. As you know, it generates 3. So I like number 2 the best. Let me just give this a little more space. All right, well, let's look on the left-hand side. Which one do we like better? The first one's super clean. Second one's got some stuff. Third one's got some stuff. All right. So what I like is the left-hand side from the first generation, but I like the right-hand side from the second generation. So what do I do? Well, the cool thing about this, being a generative layer, I can duplicate this layer, Control-Command-J, or drag it into the little plus icon, is going to give me 2 versions. So looking at this top layer, I want to look at the left-hand side, which I know was the first one. So that gives me the generation I liked there. Let's hide this. And then we go to the second layer, or the first one that we created, shows me the right-hand side that I like. So now that I've done that, I can actually just merge both of these together. And I'll show you exactly how to do it. Let's choose the mask of the top one. Remember, the top one we want the left but not the right. Now, see that mask is black and white. Where it's white, that layer is visible. Where it's black, that layer is hidden. Now, when I say hidden or visible, just kind of think of it as light. When you see the white light, you can see it. When it's dark and black, you can't see it because of the darkness. All right, so let's grab a brush here. And I want to hide the contents of the layer on the right side, which means I want black. So let me hit the D key to reset foreground background colors. And I'm just going to hit that little arrow or the X key, and black is now the foreground color. So I could do this with a marquee selection, or I can just paint, and notice as I paint, now I can just paint in the part that I want from that layer. So notice what I'm doing is, even though I made one generation and I got 3 different options, I can choose pieces of each generation. So you don't have to just do a piece, you don't just have to do it across the board. So you're like, hey, I like part of this one and I like part of the other one. That's something that happens a lot. So by doing this, creating a new layer and masking it out, you can mix and match generations together. And when I say generations, when it generates the AI, and pick the pieces that you want the most. So one of the things that we can do with Generative Fill is to create new backgrounds. So let me just quickly show you how this works. So we're going to go and we're going to grab our Quick Selection or Object Selection tool. And you'll see in the toolbar that the Select Subject is available. But we're not going to click it just yet. Let's choose the drop-down menu and make sure we're in Cloud. Once we're in the Cloud option, now we can choose Select Subject. This will give us a better subject. All right, we've made our selection. And of course, you could go through and refine that selection if you wanted. But this is good enough for me to demonstrate what I want to show you. So now I can invert this or inverse the selection by hitting Command-Shift-I. That would be Control-Shift-I in Windows, or just clicking this button. And that's the inverse button. So now we've selected everything except for our subject. Now I want to put in a background. So I'm going to click Generative Fill, and I can describe the kind of background I want. Why don't we say Japanese city, and then we're going to click Generate. Now I'd like to use things like futuristic Japanese city, but when we start to do fantasy stuff right now, at this point, Generative Fill is not very realistic. I'll say give it a month or two though, and it's going to get much more realistic when it comes to the fantasy stuff. And look at that, that's pretty good. And let's have a look and see what we've got. That one is not very good at all. And that one, she's kind of standing on a ledge, which is kind of interesting, but I'm definitely going to go with this one. Now, one of the things you're going to see is sometimes the hands can get really messed up. It's one of the things it's struggling with at the moment. And if we get a situation like that, and we can see the hands are quite different, let's just generate again and see what we get for the second time around. And if we look at this, we got a different scene here, and it definitely did a better job of the hands. But let me show you how to fix the hands here. All right, so what do we do in a situation like this where we want to fix it? Well, let's go to the original layer here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our object selection tool. Let's set that to rectangle and just drag it around the hand to see if we can get a better selection of that hand. Definitely looks a lot better. I'm going to hit Control J to copy that to a new layer. And now we're going to drag that up above the layer underneath. All right, let's just create a layer above here. And this is where we're going to fill in some of this blue. So why don't we just grab the old trusty clone stamp tool and make sure sample all layers is turned on. I'm going to Control click to select this, and now we can just paint in here. And notice that I've got my hand layer up here is hidden. Just makes it a little bit easier for me to see what's going on. And all I'm trying to do is just get rid of that little portion in there. Looks pretty good. Turn that hand back on. Looks like we missed a little bit. Let me hit the Alt Option key. Let's make it just a little smaller first though. There we go. And now we can just paint in there. So there we're combining generative fill and some little traditional techniques to just kind of finish off the image. Another thing that generative fill can do is a pretty good job of making reflections. So you might want to think about adding bodies of water or just making some areas wet or doing different things. Let me show you how it works. So I'm going to grab me marquee tool, the lasso tool, and I'm going to make a selection around the front here. So why don't we go there? And then what we're going to do is click on generative fill, and we're just going to put in puddle and then generate. And notice that it generates a pretty cool puddle. Now, one of the things when you are creating a reflection, you know, in Photoshop, a lot of us would just kind of flip something and create a reflection. It was a good way to cheat. But in reality, you're going to see a different angle. If you look at this, this is looking from underneath. So the reflection would actually be showing the underside of an object, not the top. So this is actually a more realistic reflection. And let's have a look at the second option. We've got a little bit of a ripple going in there. And then there's our third option. So we've got these different kind of puddles that we can create. Now we can also create a larger body of water. Now just bear in mind when you are creating a large body of water, the scale. So I'm going to create a lake. I don't want to make a little selection and then call it a lake. What I want to do is make a big selection over a larger area. And this would make sense now to turn this into a lake. And we'll just type in lake. And let's have a look at the other options, the other variations that we're getting out of this. Second and third variations. Okay, those were not really working very well. And if I look in here, they're just not really working. So in a situation like this, what do you do when, you know, it just doesn't work? You could hit generate again. But here's one of the things I've learned. Let me just ditch that. No pun intended. But when you create something and it just doesn't work, sometimes it's a better idea. You know, it could be just the selection that's a problem. So we're just going to go here and create a new selection. And if you look at the lesson that I did on creating objects, you'll see how important the shape is. So in this case, you know, rather than fighting it, if it fails, create a new selection. Then we're going to hit generative fill. And we're going to hit generate, and we're going to create a lake. And there we go. We get something that looks like a lake there. Or there's a second option. Or a third option that is more man-made. I think I like that particular option there. And, if we look at that, that looks pretty good, pretty realistic. So just bear that in mind that, if it's not working, just create it, just throw away the layer and create a new selection, a different selection. And that will get you further than just, regenerating and hoping it's going to hit. All right, let's look at this example. And this is a completely different example. And one of the things, if you notice, this is a very shallow depth of field. The cyclist and this carriage are in focus because they're on the same focal plane, but everything behind them, in front, off to the side, all of that is out of focus. So one of the things that's nice is this also respects the depth of field. In fact, why don't we make a selection around here? And what we're going to do is we're going to let it create a wet ground. So we're going to choose the generative fill. Now you could do wet ground, you could do wet road, you could try wet cobblestones. There's a lot of different words that you could put in there. I'm just going to do wet ground and hit generate. All right. And now we get something that looks a little bit more like a puddle. Let's select this other option or the third option. Okay, I kind of like that one. So it kind of looks like we've got a little bit of a puddle there, that the ground it's not a lake. It's not a huge body of water. It's just got a little water there in the on the cobblestones on the ground, and you can see the reflections, how good they are. But not only that, notice in this area here where everything is sharp and in focus because this is where the focal plane is, and then as it comes forward, notice that it gets more out of focus. See the edges there are soft and blurry. So it's actually respecting the lighting, it's respecting the depth of field, and obviously it's also respecting the reflections. And I think that is pretty cool. So a really amazing and very useful thing to know is that Generative Fill will respect the depth of field. So we're going to start with this photo of me in my loft in LA a few years ago, and I'm going to demonstrate it. Then we're going to use another image, and I'm going to show you how to create that and generate it for yourself. So why don't we just start with creating some kind of a, an object here. We could do whatever we want. Why don't we just do the obvious? We'll just do a cat. Oh, it's got to have a cat, right? All right, so there's a cat. There's a second cat, a third cat. The eyes are weird on that one, but that one looks really good, and so does that one. And you can see that they're sharp in focus. Now, if I generate an object over here in the blurry area, because it's out of focus now, because it's further away, and I type in, say, car. Now, notice that the car, even though it's very large, it's a giant car. I would just make the selection smaller to make that fit, or we could do something like an SUV, that's more accurate. And notice that it's blurry, and it just kind of, because of where it is in the focal plane, it kind of respects that. I do notice that it's way too big compared to the other cars, so let me just show you how to fix that. I just hit Control-T, that's Command-T, and then we'll just make this a bit smaller so it's more to scale. And then just simply hit generate one more time because we're still on that generative layer. It's still a car. It just doesn't match the background anymore. But if I hit generate, it's going to create 3 more versions of it. And all of those are going to fit that new mask. And they're all going to be to scale and blend it into the background. There we go. Much better. And we can look at all of those options. And they just fit right in there. All right, so what happens if we have a photograph like this where we've got a lot of distance, but the aperture was closed down more, so we don't have that extended depth of field. We have a very wide depth of field, whereas the other shot had a more shallow depth of field. Okay, so what we can do is we can imitate that. So if we choose filter, and then we go to the blur, and we go to the blur gallery, and we choose field blur, we can add the depth of field. So what we're going to do is tap on the bottom. I want to set that to 0. So here's a tip. Hit the Control or Command key, double click, and that will set that blur to 0. That's the blur amount there. And the second point there, the blur is at 15. We can make it more or less, but this will work. So we're just going to click OK. So what I've done now is I've simulated shooting with a shallower depth of field with maybe an aperture of maybe a 2.8 or a 4 or something like that. Okay, so now when we go to put something in the distance, the question is, will Generative Fill know that this is not a real photograph, as far as the blur? Yes, it will. It will do that. Let's do this right now. We're going to put a car into the background. Let's grab it here, and we're just going to type in car. All right, and here we have 3 different vehicles that it's created. And they look quite good. Okay, so one of the things, notice how much blur is on this and the distance that it's at. If I make this smaller, Control T, there's Command T, I'm going to make this much smaller, and I'm going to put it up here to simulate that it's actually further away from the camera now. Watch what happens when I regenerate this. It's actually going to adapt the amount of blur. Look at that. I think that's pretty amazing. And then just to kind of show you one more, let's bring it forward now. This would create a toy car, but let's make it bigger. And let's see if it can get us a sharper car by coming forward more. So now we're going to generate in that larger area. We're just going to hit generate one more time. And look at that. Now that car is much sharper. Okay, that's almost like a Mercedes, almost. All right, so there's something for you to bear in mind now when you're generating and you have a shallower depth of field. Pay attention to placement and scale because they really do matter. In this tutorial, we're going to add a shark, but you're going to learn 2 things. One is to adjust the density to make it look like something is underwater. But even more importantly than that, I'm going to show you how to take control over the direction and the placement of something beyond what you can normally do. Because normally, when you create something, it just kind of is looking the way it wants to look, right? So let's jump in and you'll see what I mean. So the first thing I want to do is I'm just going to make a rough selection with the lasso tool. And let's just make a rough selection around here, and I'm just going to generate the first shark. I say the first shark, and you'll see what I mean. So we're just going to choose Generative Fill and type in shark. This is like a placeholder, so to speak. And all I really want from this is the selection. So hopefully we get a good silhouette of a shark. I'm not worried about the shape of it. Within it, I'm not worried about the colors or anything. Let's have a look. What have we got there? That's a good silhouette of a shark. I like that. That's my favorite. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to select it. So let's go to the quick selection tool here. We've got object selection or quick selection. Now, of course, if you had a photograph, you could use it to get that selection as well. And of course, we can just roll over and click it for the selection. Or we could go up under select subject and choose cloud option and then hit select subject. But I'm just going to select it here. This is going to be good enough, I think, for what we need. So let's have a look here. And we're just going to throw away this layer. Great. Looks like there's a little bit of work I need to do in that selection. Let me just grab this and I'm going to hold down the shift key to add to it. And we're just going to get these little holes that got in here. We want to get rid of those. So maybe the select subject might have done better, but that's great. That's exactly what we want. Now we've got the silhouette. Now what it's going to do is it's going to generate this within the silhouette. But I need to make the silhouette a little bit bigger because it will make it a little bit smaller than this area. It looks like I missed a bit on that fin too. Let me grab that. There we go. And we're just going to click on here and we're going to choose to expand the selection. 25 is great. Now, this is where we control this. What I don't want to do is I don't want to cut this. I want to just move the selection. And why don't we choose the select? And under select, we're going to use the transform selection. Now this enables me to change the orientation. So if I want the shark swimming between the surfers and not heading towards them, I could do it like this. I can literally put it wherever I want. And when I generate this shark, it's going to generate it within this area. And I'm actually going to just take it there so it's partially covering that turtle. And we're going to hit enter. All right, so we've got our selection. What we want to do is we want to save our selection. So we're going to choose select. And we're now going to choose to save the selection, just in case we need it later. Call it shark. Click OK. Great. Now what I want to do is I want to go into quick mask mode. So I'm going to hit the Q key for quick mask. And if you look inside the channels, let me just drag this out to the side, you can see it. So the quick mask essentially is a temporary channel. So it just creates a channel. So watch this. If I hit the Q key, it goes back to a selection, back to a channel. It toggles. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to fill the inner part here. Notice it's white and black. I don't want it to be white. I want to fill it with a gray. And by the way, if I hide this up here, you can see there's our mask. So I want this to be gray rather than white. So if I hit the Control key or the Command key, I can click to load that as a selection. And I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm just going to choose the foreground color. Now, the higher or the whiter I make this, the more opaque it's going to appear. When I say opaque, it's going to look like it's, just floating on the surface. The more darker I create this mask, when it generates this, it's going to make it look more like it's more underwater. Now, this is different in opacity. If it was just opacity, you would see the things underneath it. So this is actually generating it at this density, but you're not going to see the objects underneath, so it's not transparent. So let's take it down to about 29 is where we are right now, and click OK. So with that brush, let's just fill it. Great. And now why don't we just turn off the selection, Control D will turn off that selection. Now, if I hit the Q key, what it's going to do is it's going to convert this back to a selection. If I hit the Q key, see Quick Mask, Selection. Now, you won't see the selection because it's less than 50%, so it's not going to show. Just to prove you it's there, look, see if I paint. Let me just undo that. So it's there. We just can't see that selection. Great. Now what we want to do is we want to generate. So let's grab our layer. And under our layer, we're going to choose our generative fill. And now we're going to type in shark. And hit generate. And now we're going to let it generate our shark in the orientation and the position where we want, but also with that lower density, so it's going to look like it's underwater. So let's see how it goes. And look at that. There's our shark in the direction position we wanted, and it's underwater. And we've got 2, 3 variations of that. I like actually pretty much all of those, but I think I'm going to go with this one. And notice, see where the turtle was under there? Notice it's not showing through. If I'd done this as an opacity, watch this, I changed the opacity, you can see the layers underneath. See that? But in this case, it's generated like that. We even see the caustics of that across the top. That's those kind of reflections from the waves. And yeah, I think that's worked out pretty well. Right, in this lesson, you're going to learn how to change the color of something. Because once we generate something, if you don't like the color or you want to modify the color, and you modify the prompt by changing the color in there, it's not just going to change the color, it's also going to change the object. Let me demonstrate and show you how to fix that. So let's grab our lasso tool. And why don't we just make a little selection around her here, and we're going to give her a little bit of an arm, and let's go down there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit Generative Fill, and why don't we give her a dark blue t-shirt. And click Generate. All right, so there's a shirt there. There's a second one, and there's a third one. I think I like the style of the first one. Now, what if I want to make that blue a little bit darker, or I want to make it a completely different color? So, for example, we could go in here and we could change it from dark blue to a deep blue, or we could make it a deep green. And then hit Generate. All right, I do like the color of that. That's very cool. But if you look at this, look around the collar and, down the bottom, the sleeve, it doesn't fit as well. It's a different shirt. Let me drag this out here. So if we look at that one, notice it's a completely different shirt. So what we want to do is keep this shirt and make this green. So how do we do that? Well, let me show you. What we want to do is, rather than using the generator, we're just going to use a traditional tool inside of Photoshop. And we're going to grab the adjustment layer, and we're going to grab our hue saturation. So let's grab our hue saturation. Now I only want it to affect the layer directly underneath. I don't want to affect the entire image. So the way to affect just the layer directly under an adjustment layer is to hit this little icon there. And this will clip it to that layer. Alternatively, if you hold down the Alt or the Option key, you can click to toggle between that. So when you see that little arrow, it's only going to affect that layer. That's what we want. Now, if we go into hue saturation and we move the hue, notice we can change it and we can get that green, but it's also picking up the areas of his skin where the selection was. So clearly that's not going to work. I'm going to double click to reset that. What we need to do is constrain it or clamp it to a particular color. And we can do that by grabbing this little finger, and then what we don't want to do is hit a highlight area, and we don't want to hit a shadow area. We're looking for the diffuse value or the true value of that blue, which is right in there. So I'm clicking. Notice as I click, it adds this clamp in here, and it constrains it to that area. So now when I change the color, it's just changing that area. Now, here's the thing. With this area, we can expand it by dragging out, or we can clamp it in by dragging it in. Sometimes you'll get a selection like this. So just pull it out a little bit more to make sure you've selected the whole thing. Same thing on the other side. Just making sure that we're really in there. There we go. Now we've selected the whole thing. Much better. Okay. So the hue is going to give us the direct color. So, you know, we could be reds. We could literally make this any color we want, right? And we said we were going to do a green, so let's do a greenish tone. So the saturation is the amount of color. If I take it all the way to the left, it gives us gray. Go all the way to the right, and it's iridescent. So let's just start about there, and then we've got the lightness. If we push the lightness to the left, it's going to give us a deeper color. To the right, it goes brighter. And in fact, you can make that white, or you can make it black. So we can literally create any color we want. Let's go darker, give it more saturation. And maybe just fine tune the amount of green that we want. And then if you look at that right there, that's how easy it is for us to change the color of something. And if we hide that layer, there's the blue, there's the green. In this example, we're going to do something really fun. We're going to merge two photographs together to create kind of like a panorama, but they're going to be completely different photos. So we're going to have this photo here of the ocean that I shot with my drone. You can see it just kind of hitting the beach. And then here's another drone shot that I shot of a forest. So I want to combine these two images into one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the forest into the ocean image. So grab the Move tool, click, drag into the tab of the image you want to go into, and then just release. And now we've got it inside on two separate layers. Now I want to extend this, so I'm just going to drag this out to the bottom. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And then what we're going to do is use the crop tool, and then we're going to expand it. So with the crop tool selected, make sure you hit clear so there's no aspect ratio, and then drag it out a little bit. Let's drag it out to about there, hit enter. Great. Now let's take our forest, and we're going to drag this further back. So what I want to do now is I want to blend these photos so it looks like it's all in one scene. So I'm going to grab the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to start a little bit inside the forest to give it a little bit of space, maybe even more, give it more space to work with, and then I'm going to go up into the sand. And at this point, I'm going to hit Generative Fill, and I'm not going to put any text in. I'm just going to hit Generate, and I'm going to let it kind of merge these two together and build a new image. And that's the first variation. Not too impressive. Second variation, definitely looking really good. And the third variation, which I think is a keeper. Now, remember what I told you earlier on about resolution. So when we're working with these samples currently, as you can see how they're really quite small because they only work at 1K, which is 1024 by 1024. Now later on, as this matures and it ends up in the big Photoshop, this is not going to be an issue. We're going to get high resolution images. But for now, if you do want to increase the resolution, what you can do is just create smaller pieces. All right, let's composite a couple of our own images together. And what we're going to do is, right now I'm using Bridge. Now you could just choose File Open from within Photoshop. You could bring it in from Lightroom, or you could be using Bridge. So let me just show you this. We click, and then we click again, holding down the Control key. That would be the Command key on the Mac, and we're selecting these two images. We want to open them both. So I'm going to right click. Now we could choose to open these as layers inside of Photoshop, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to open these in Photoshop Beta. At the time of this recording, Generative Fill is just in beta. It will be added to regular Photoshop at another time. So let's just choose this right now. Great. So now we've got two images. We've got our boat and our volcano. Now this volcano happens to be Diamond Head in Hawaii, but I want to composite this as if it's an island. So the first step we need to do is combine the images. Grab the Move tool, click in the middle, and drag up into the tab of where we want to go. Don't release. Go to the middle, and now you can release, and notice it's combined both images on separate layers. Great. What we want to do now is reposition our what's going to become our island. I'm going to take it to the top so we can use the sky off that. And, let's make it a little bit bigger. Control T or Command T is going to make this bigger. And I'm going to drag this out. Now, one of the things that is going to happen is we're going to find that this mask is probably going to get messed up. So we will address that. So the nice thing about this course is we're not just using the AI, we're also using our traditional Photoshop tools alongside it to get the results that we're looking for. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to just kind of make this look like an island. So let's grab the lasso tool. And what I don't want to show is any of the road. So we're going to have the water is going to kind of come up here. And the rest of this is going to be underwater. So I'm just kind of following it across there. And maybe we can go right there. Actually, don't worry about that top bit. We'll fix that. And we're going to go up here. Excellent. You know what? I don't want any of that city in there. So why don't we add that? So I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And that's going to enable us to add to the selection. And let's grab a little bit out there. Let's go over there, and we've selected all of that. That's great. That's what we want to get rid of. All right, so in order to blend these two together, we're going to go to the Generative Fill, and we want to use the existing pixels in the photo, so we're not generating anything new. We're letting it generate whatever it needs to kind of combine these. So let's just hit Generate without putting any words in. Right now it's sending it to the cloud. It's processing in the cloud, doing its thing, and then it'll be sending it back to our computer with the result. And look at that. So we've got three results. So if we go into the Properties panel, we can see there's our first result. There's our second, and there's our third. So this one, rather than being an island, is kind of more like a peninsula. This is kind of looking a little bit more like an island. And if we want to get rid of this, we could just even go further. Let's just grab this area now. And what we're going to do is we're going to guide it. So we're going to hit Generative Fill, and we're just going to type in ocean. And then we're going to click Generate, and then let it do its thing. And let's look at a couple of the other results. Look at that. Or that other one. Those are looking pretty good. All right. So that's looking pretty nice. Now, obviously, the scale's a little bit crazy, and that's just we could resize this. Actually, I'm noticing when I go here, it kind of feels like the scale could be more believable. But once we start going to this area here, it starts to get a little unbelievable. Notice that because there's just too much scale kind of going on here. So why don't we just generate again and give it another. See what we get. So each time we hit Generate, we're going to get 3 more variations. I like the result, but I don't like the scale we're getting with the boat. All right, let's see what we've got here. Definitely better. I think I'm going to go with this one because this kind of matches the scale. Now there's this little tower up here. Let's get rid of that because that's going to mess up our scale as well. So we know how big Diamond Head is. Well, if you've been there, you know how big it is. But once we get rid of these telltale signs like that, then there's no real sense of scale. So it could be a much smaller island. There we go. And that could be where the boat is. Now let's look at the boat here. If we look at the mast, see how the mast needs to go higher than that? So what we need to do is, let's hide all the layers. Just hold the Alt or the Option key and click on the eyeball. It'll hide all the layers except for the layer that we want to work on, which is this boat. And let's select it. So we're going to grab one of the magic tools. There's 3 of them here. And when we grab any of those tools, it enables us to do our select subject. Make sure we're on the right layer. There we go. Select subject is now active, and then we're going to choose the cloud option. The cloud option is going to give us better result, and then choose select subject. And now it's going to select our mast and our boat. Great. Let's copy this. Control J will copy this to a new layer. Let's turn on all our layers, drag our part of the mast to the top. If we look at that before and after, we've just fixed our mast and we've been able to put together our image. All right, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this photo A shot of Megan and we're going to have her flying over a town. You know, kind of like Wendy from Peter Pan was what I was thinking of when I shot this picture. Now, I've heard some people say, you know, hey, AI is replacing photography and everything else, but I still had to get the model and the lighting and the posing and the costume and everything else and take the photograph. And you're going to see that AI is a tool that's going to help us, but we're also going to be using other tools inside of Photoshop to accomplish the result. All right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get rid of the arm here. This is her husband holding her so she doesn't fall over. And, you know, we don't want her to hurt herself. So let's go ahead and we're going to see if we can get rid of his arm. Just going to select all of that, just roughly. And what we're going to do now is we're going to hit Generative Fill. And I just want to remove it, and hopefully we can save some of her arm and it will rebuild part of her dress. Let's hit Generate. And we'll see what kind of a result we get here. All right, excellent. So we've got rid of the arm. Let's look at the other 2 options because it always creates 3 variations. I like that one better already because look at that. We've got the dress there. And let's look at the 3rd option. It's pretty good too. It's actually quite hard to decide which one to use. I'm going to use this one because it kind of seems like, you know, it's bellowing up a little bit in the wind. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is something I don't do a lot, but I'm actually going to Control E, and I'm going to merge these together because I just want a nice clean plate without that arm there. All right, excellent. So the next thing, let me zoom out. I think we're going to expand this image a little bit, so let's grab the crop tool here. And then we're going to drag it down and out a little bit. Give us a little bit more space. So she's kind of flying out in the front. All right. Excellent. So the next thing we need to do is select our model. So I'm just going to zoom in here until we can see her nicely. And let's start with another AI tool that you've been using for a while. And that is the Object or the Quick Selection tool when it's tied in with Select Subject. So if we choose Cloud as an option, it's going to give us better results. And now we're going to choose Select Subject. All right, this is a good start. Now, I'm not worried about this flyaway here because I was hoping to get it with a fan to really blow it up, but it just didn't quite, get what we were looking for, so that's fine. All right, what we want to do now is just kind of clean up this selection. I want to add to the selection, so I'm just going to click down here. Maybe we can grab some of her dress in there, and this will help kind of guide things a little bit. And whoops, don't want that far. All right, so that will kind of help. And let's hit the Alt or the Option key, and let's get rid of that chair. And let's just put some of that hair back in. Now, another option I could do is just try and rebuild the dress here, but I think we're going to be okay. So let's go to Select and Mask. And under the Select and Mask, we're just kind of making sure we're going to grab our hairbrush. And I'm just going to paint on the edge of this hair just to kind of get us, just kind of aid in getting a better kind of an edge. Not that that matters too much because we're going to change this anyway. I'm just trying to get, just a little bit of selection to start with. It's looking pretty good. And, there's other areas we could touch up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give it a little bit of radius. And I'll just kind of sharpen these edges a little bit. Decontaminate colors will get rid of any kind of edge fringing. And, this is going to be good enough for us to work off. You could spend more time, getting the selection perfect, but I think you get the general idea of what we want to do. And we're going to output to a new layer with a layer mask. All right, so this is our model here. It's looking good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a selection by choosing the mask. So I'm clicking on the mask there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to inverse the selection. So you'll see this tool up here that enables me to inverse that selection. And now what I want to do is I want to create a layer. And let me just show the whole thing. Control or Command 0. So it's a pretty large area, maybe a little larger than I need. But we want to go in and we're going to generate our background now. So we're going to choose Generative. And why don't we do Flying Over English Town. All right, and we're going to hit Generate, and let's see what kind of a background we can create. And notice that that's created a brand new layer, which is nice. All right, so there's one option, there's a second option, and let's look at a third option. The third option is definitely closer to what I'm looking for as far as our Peter Pan look. Now, notice that that is kind of selected there. So why don't I just Control J, and that's going to copy the layer of our model, and I'm going to drag that above. Now, notice we've got some weird kind of doubling. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enlarge this. Control T will enable us to do that. And I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm just going to hold down the Alt or the Option key, and I'm just going to drag it out. So what we're doing here is we're just dragging out Megan, our model here, to kind of fill out that area a little bit better. Now, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to hide everything, and we're going to fill up this area now inside the town. So let's just go here. Now you're asking the question, well, why didn't I just create this layer on its own? Why didn't I just cut it out, generate a background, and drop it on top? Glad you asked. And the reason we're doing it this way is because we can kind of guide it with our model, and this is showing us the angle and the lighting and different things like that. So it's not just going to be random. Now we're going to hit Generative Fill, and we're going to fill in this blank area. And if you look at it, see how the light's coming from the left? You can tell because of the shadows there. This will just fill this in and give us a nice backdrop. Great. And let's get our model again. We're going to turn her on, drag her above. And if you notice now that we've got a match there with the lighting. And also the depth of field is also matching. So this is why we went ahead and did it the way we did. Now there's other things we can do if we want to match the color a little bit more. If we feel like, hey, it needs a little bit more, why don't we select that and we'll use another neural filter. So we're going to go up under the filters, and then we're going to go to the neural filters. One of the filters under here is harmonization. If you see that little cloud, click it to download it. And then what we want to do is we've selected our layer with Megan on it. So that's the layer we're working with. But what we need to do is, actually let me just cancel that, make sure we selected layer and not the mask. There we go. Okay, good, we're on that layer. And let's choose filter. And we're going to grab our neural filters. Loads it in, great, harmonization, and we're going to turn it on. All right, great. So now what we we know we've got Megan selected. So what we want to do is we want to match the color and the tone with the background. It looks pretty close already, but let's just go ahead. And so here's the background that we've created. So now it's going to analyze that, put the color in there. Look at that. And I can adjust the strength if it's a little too strong. Let's bring it down a little bit. And notice now we're starting to match the tones of that image underneath. Great. Click OK. All right, Control D turns off the selection. All right, so now we've got her flying through the air. But one of the things that I want to do is I want to kind of have her hair flowing, kind of blowing backwards. So we're going to grab our lasso tool. And then we're going to grab the top of her hair. And let's go back quite a way because she has very long hair. And I'm even going to go over part of her arm there. And then we're going to go up to that area. Maybe, in fact, I should go in a little bit more. There we go. Select that in there. So this is giving us this room for hair to kind of fly in there. And I can hit the Option key if I just kind of want to shape more what my result is going to be. I can do that. All right, so let's hit Generative Fill. Now, I'm not just going to type in hair, because if I do hair, it could do curly hair, it could do straight hair. Her hair here is definitely wavy. So we're going to choose wavy hair. Now, these are the kind of prompts you want to add. You don't want to say things like add hair or have hair blowing. Hair blowing might work. Sometimes it doesn't. But what you definitely want to do is give it the object, which is hair. And then you describe it with things like maybe wavy or brown. You could give it the color. There's different things like that. All right, so let's just go ahead and we're going to choose Generate now. You don't want to say replace something with something else. Those kind of words don't work in this kind of text prompt. All right, so let's see what we get. And we'll get 3 variations. Hopefully one of those is going to be usable. Look at that. That is great. Let's look at the second option. That's really good too. And the third option, somehow I feel like the first option is probably the most realistic. All right, and as you can see there, we're using some of the different tools together to get us the result we're looking for. I'm going to show you something really amazing, and that's the fact that we can actually create actions with Generative Fill. Now, not everything is going to work on an action, but I want to show you the basics of how this works, and you can kind of start to use your creativity to do some things for yourself. So we want to open the Actions panel, and that's going to be the F9 key, or go under Window, and then we're going to choose Actions. All right, so now that we've got the actions, we want to create a new action. So hit the little plus button here. And we'll just make it fill a background. So we're going to hit record. So now that we've got the record, you're going to see the little red button is going, the button that you would see on your phone or on your computer when you're recording. And what it's going to do is it's not recording me in real time, but it's going to record some of my actions or some of my clicks and menu commands. So what we want to do is grab the object selection or the quick selection. Let's grab the quick selection and notice it says, hey, grab the quick selection brush. Okay. And then we're going to choose select subject. And it's going to go, oh yeah, select subject. Okay, that's what you want to do. Now I want to inverse the selection. I could click the little button here, or I could hit Command-Shift-I to inverse it. So now we've selected everything but our object. And now we're going to hit Generative Fill. And now if I leave this blank, it'll just generate it blank. Or I can put some words in here and it will grab those. So why don't we do let's do a forest. And then we're going to click Generate. So what it's doing right now is it's just going to generate a background for us based on that forest. So this is a basic action I'm showing you right now. All right, so we've created that and let's just hit stop. So it's recording that, right? And now we can say, hey, that first one's not very good. The second one's a lot better. Third is not bad. Now, of course, you could go in and you could refine these selections or do different things like that. But I, once again, just want to show you how it works. Okay, so that's we've got the action. All right, so let's look in the actions here and see what we can see. So if we pop this open, notice that it's recorded the prompt. So it knows the mode, it knows everything that we're doing. So watch this. So if we go through to say something else, we grab this picture here, and now we want to run it, select that action, hit the play button. It's going to run through all those actions, and now it's generating the forest on the back of this photo. So one of the nice things about using actions is it skips most of the on-screen, so you don't have to watch the screen refresh. Look at that. Worked really well on this image. That looks good. I really like that. That came out really well. Now this is going to be weird because it's probably going to get the hand in there as well, but you're going to get the idea, so let's just try it. Because a bit of a complex image here to just do the select subject without any refining. All right, so we've got something sort of interesting here. Look at that. That's actually pretty clever. And here she is in the forest, lying on a tree trunk, lying on there, and lying on here. All right, so what do we do if we want to be able to interact with this to get a better result? Well, what we can do is see where it says the select subject. Okay, so what we're going to do is choose select subject, and then we're going to apply in here. And what we want to do is insert a stop. And then we're going to say refine selection. And then we're going to choose allow continue. All right. Now watch what happens when I run this. Now we could do this on any of these. We could put it on here. So if we want to use a different prompt or anything like that, we could do it as well. But let me just run this action, and you can see we're going to run the action. Now it's going to say, hey, refine the selection. Oh, okay. So I'm going to hit stop. If I liked it and the selection looked good, I would have just hit continue. But in this case, I know I need to do a little bit of work. Just to show you. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to hit Generative Fill. I'm going to generate this to try and get rid of that arm. All right, so at this point, now that we've done that, what we need to do is load that selection again. Now, I want to make sure I get both of these good. So I'm going to merge these two down because I paused this action. It doesn't really matter right now. So we just got rid of the arm. We've got this right there. Look at that. It looks pretty good. So I could run this action all over again if I wanted, or I could just pick up where we left off, and I could grab the quick selection, choose select subject, and I think it looks pretty good. And now we're just going to continue with the rest of the action. So now it's going to inverse it, and it's going to apply a generative fill. And there we go. Now we've got the forest. So you can see how you can stop in there if you need to refine that.